Okay, good afternoon. It is now the afternoon. I am Jessica Wilkes-Ball. I am the Sustainability Manager here at Mills Reeve. Welcome to this last in our series of our OMB webinars. So this one today is, what does ESG mean to you? Identifying priorities and practical steps. So the UN Secretary General at the launch of the IPCC report in April gave this very stark warning. I like a quote. You'll find a couple of those in this presentation today. But he said that we've got to stay below this 1.5 degree limit. It will be catastrophic if we go over that. Business leaders are saying one thing and doing another. Simply put, they're lying and the results will be catastrophic. So hopefully today we can give you a bit of an overview of what we're doing at Mills Reeve, but also give you some practical tips to take away with you. I absolutely adore Patagonia. I think they're a fantastic company. And this quote is one of my favourites. So caring for our planet is not in conflict with running a successful business. And it really isn't. The two absolutely go hand in hand. So let's set the scene then. The government strategy Mission Zero, I'm 2/3 of the way through it. It's a very hefty 300-page document, but I would really encourage any business owners out there who haven't had a look at it yet to have a read. It's got some really critical points in there about how private industry and businesses are really going to be helped to drive forward our ambitions for net zero. There's also a lot around climate litigation at the moment. So there's a law firm called Client Earth who are taking Shell's board to court, individually suing them for their failure on properly preparing for the net zero transition. There's also a Peruvian farmer who's filing a claim against RWE, which is Germany's biggest electricity producer. It's involving actually the climate change that's affecting his farm over in Peru by emitting substantial volumes of greenhouse gases. And it's really affecting the local area. So we are going to see an upturn in climate litigation. For us as a law firm, we advise a lot of our clients about how to be environmentally sustainable. We put a lot of clauses in our drafting now, and we work with the Chancery Lane project, which also gives some really great clauses for people to put into contracts around climate change. But obviously, there's a real push from chief executive officers around making sure that net zero is at the heart of all their businesses. And also this Deloitte sustainability report, I'd really encourage you to have a look at that. And they said that actually one of the top 3 issues was climate change. Climate change is going to affect all of us. Snow in March is pretty much unheard of. So we really want to make sure that collectively businesses are working together to help us to achieve our aims. So what are 2023's top trends then? So the recent focus on Scope 3, carbon credits and carbon removal is going to accelerate. Resilience and adaptation, there's further progress on loss and damage and the global adaptation goals, and making sure that we are adapting in the way that we operate our business in the most sustainable way possible. Big focus on tackling plastic and chemical pollution. There's new legislation coming in October this year around takeaways and what you can actually sell products in and how you can take those away. So any businesses who have catering outlets, there's a real drive to make real strategic change, but also legislative changes coming as well. Ecosystems and resources, there's a new biodiversity framework that will set the stage for rising global scrutiny and collaboration on nature-based solutions. And finally, social sustainability. I think we've all been affected by the cost of living crisis, but this offers opportunities for more inclusive climate action. So making sure that products are produced in the right way, but also that they are recycled, reused, or making sure that things aren't being wasted and anything that we can recycle is being recycled. You'll also see that corporate net zero commitments are actually rising. We've made a commitment to reduce our emissions in line with the SBTi guidance with a near and a long-term target, and I'll come on to that slightly later about what we're doing here at Mills Reeve. So what do future business owners and leaders demand from businesses? You'll see on here that 50% of workers want their employers to demonstrate climate and social commitments, but also 33% of those aged 18 to 24 would turn down a job if ESG factors were deemed lacking. And across all age categories, 82% want to be able to link their own values and their own purpose with the organisation that they work for. Children of business owners are starting to ask probing questions about their money, where money is invested. And millennial and Gen Z children are keener than ever not to inherit what they see as dirty money. So investment and financial performance. So over the last 10 to 15 years, there's been a real growth of new and innovative approaches to investments that seek to balance not just financial, but also social returns. Having a comprehensive ESG strategy integrated into your corporate strategy can create financial and non-financial value over an extended period of time. Upwards of 70% of consumers surveyed on purchasing multiple industries said they were paying an additional 5% for a green product if it met the same performance standards as non-green alternatives. So nature-based solutions, the target is for 60 to 80% of all landowners and farmers to adopt nature-friendly farming practices. Recent problems uncovered in carbon markets do need to be addressed and fixed. Offsetting and the purchase of carbon credits for many years has been controversial, and identifying the right offset projects, which can only be used as a last resort and used them as part of an overall net zero strategy. But protecting nature comes at a cost. But is assigning a value to protect nature ethical? And fossil fuel producers are some of the biggest purchasers of carbon credits. At Mills Reeve, we're still taking a very measured approach in terms of what we would want to do in offsetting. And we're looking at options through some of our clients who are doing some really innovative offsetting schemes to see whether they would actually fit with us. You know, our emissions are about 1,100 tonnes, which doesn't sound a lot, but you know, it's still significant. And to be able to reduce that, we need to look at all areas of our business where we can make a real strategic difference. But we do recognise that there will be some element of offsetting to get us to reach that SBTI measurement. So talking of measurements, so there's a whole myriad of standards and frameworks and different ways in which you can prove to the world how good you are as a business. But a recent Financial Times article referred to the ESG investment sector as rife with greenwashing. These concerns not only diminish trust in institutions and the system as a whole, but significantly pose a danger to the socio-economic and environmental challenges that we're trying to solve. For us, we are committed to the UN Global Compact. We are also working towards ISO 14001, which is a really solid foundation for us to be able to build what our net zero strategy will look like. But it also gives us the overarching scrutiny of how we operate our business in the most sustainable way as possible. But it also gives us, that credibility with our clients, because we are asked in an awful lot of tenders, and an awful lot of the suppliers are now asking, well, you say you're green, but how do you actually prove that? And ISO 14001 is a real step towards how we're going to do that. If you go onto our website, we have a net zero statement, and we also have our sustainability report, which I'd really encourage you to read. And then we've also got our carbon reduction plan, which we produce annually. And again, that is also on our website. So I'd encourage you to have a look at that to see what Mills and Reeve are doing, and also the kinds of reports that organisations like ourselves are having to create. We use carbon footprint to create our annual report each year of our carbon emissions, and we're looking towards deep diving into what our scope 3 emissions are, especially around our suppliers. And we're looking to build a bespoke solution so we can collect that data in a really measured way, but also so it's in the most accurate format for us as possible. Going back to the Financial Times, they also mentioned that there is a huge desire to get beyond greenwashing, and this has accelerated the drive towards sustainability standards. However, there's a lot of misinformation around what the distinction is between standards, frameworks, rankings, ratings, and the differences in approaches and scope. I would really encourage you to have a look at what your competitors are doing and other people in your landscape to see what standards they are reporting against. You don't have to report against every single one. It's really important that you pick the ones that are most material to your business, but also most material to your industry. So talking about net zero and the difference between 1.5 and 2 degrees, we have to achieve absolute reductions in emissions. It covers our operational emissions, scope 1 and 2, but also if our supply chain emissions, scope 3, make up more than 40% of our total footprint, they also must be included. And they do make up more than 40%. Most professional services firms will see their emissions in their scope 3 between 70 and 90% of all of their emissions. So we have a target, and we have a target period of between 5 and 15 years of the date of our announcement. So you'll see on here that the difference between 2.5 and 1.5, half a degree, what's that between friends? Well, actually, it's a huge, huge difference. If you look at the global GDP loss, it's a 5% increase in losses if we go above that 1.5 degree. We're signed up to the Science Based Targets Initiative, which means that we will set our near-term and our long-term target. So our near-term target is 2030, and we look to achieve a 35% reduction between now and 2030. So we need to reduce by a minimum of 4.2% to meet our near-term target. And our long-term target is 2050. Now, this webinar is being recorded, so I'm going to be very careful what I say here, but I would like us to think that we would hit that before 2050. Don't hold me to that though. But no, I do genuinely think as a business, and I think a lot of businesses out there are being quite cautious and choosing 2050, but I think the ambition is to actually reach that much, much earlier. So that's the end of my slides. I'm going to hand over to Ainslie, and I look forward to answering your questions at the end.
Thank you very much, Jess. So I am going to talk to you all today about diversity and inclusion, which is a very large part of the S of ESG. I think people have heard of diversity and inclusion. It's been embedded in a lot of organisations, and it's been talked about a lot over a good number of years. And we could focus our attentions on it being the right thing to do and all of that, and that's great. If you're in that place, that's wonderful. I'm right there with you. But ultimately, the reason it's important for organisations to be focusing on diversity and inclusion is it's good for your bottom line. If you want to make more money, then focusing on diversity and inclusion is going to help you to do that. McKinsey & Co have been tracking about 1,000 organisations globally since 2014 to try and establish what the actual impact looks like. And this is the most recent results of that in 2019. Obviously, it'll be interesting to see what impact the pandemic has had on this. But I think given that diversity and inclusion is so useful to organisations in making sure that they're more creative, that they're able to kind of see risks coming from further off, that they've got greater diversity of thought, all of those sorts of things. I think what we will probably see is that this trend will continue, even with the pandemic impacting on businesses, because they will have been able to have more creative responses to it. I also like a quote. And the other reason that we should be focusing on diversity and inclusion is because we are increasingly starting to see that investors are taking it into account when it comes to their investment decisions. This is a quote here from Vanguard, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of. It's a very large investment company, very well known. And they believe that diversity, equity, and inclusion risks are equally as disruptive as climate-related risks. The UN's Principles for Responsible Investment saw a really marked uptick in mentions of D&I and proxy voting. So it went from 7% in 2017, I think it was, up to 20% in 2020. Again, that's sort of slightly pre-pandemic. And I think that we will just see, in fact, we probably have seen a much larger increase since the pandemic when it comes to that, because since then we've had not just a pandemic, but there's been the resurgence of Black Lives Matter, there's been the murder of George Floyd. We've seen more and more discussion about diversity and inclusion related issues in the media, so it is much more front of mind for quite a lot of people, and we're seeing more and more organisations take it quite seriously in terms of their organisational strategies. Sorry, I'm just waiting for the next slide and then I shall carry on. There we go. So it's very easy to say it's really important, take it seriously, go and do it. But what does that actually mean? What is it important to focus on? I mean, if you're lucky enough to work for an organisation that's able to put a significant amount of budget behind diversity and inclusion, then that is fantastic. But actually, it's not completely necessary, especially if you're early on in your journey. There's lots and lots of things that you can do to move your organisations along that pathway. Focusing on what data you've got available to you, making sure you've got a really good baseline. Do you understand what your workforce looks like? Do you understand where your gaps are? Do you know what the challenges are that you're facing in trying to sort of plug those gaps? Is there pipeline issues? Is there nobody in from a particular group in your field that you're hiring from? Things like that. So really using data to analyze diversity is a really great starting point for any organization looking to start a program. It's absolutely crucial for talent attraction. We know that, and Steph touched on some of these stats about what especially younger people coming into the workforce now are expecting of employers. And we know that a lot of younger people coming in, sort of that Gen Z generation, are really expecting people to have a focus on diversity and inclusion. They want to make sure that they're working for employers that are really valuing them as individuals and valuing the different experiences that they can bring to the workplace. So being able to have some sort of program in place that you can talk about in your social media and on your websites when people are researching your organization is going to really help with your talent attraction piece. You can also do quite a lot around talent attraction internally. So thinking about the processes that you've got in place for all of your recruitment, and how that might be disadvantaging certain groups of people is a really easy thing for somebody to do. I mean, if you're advertising roles in one place and one place only, is that just attracting the same sorts of people to continue? And you might be getting really top talent from that, and that's fantastic, but you're fishing from a smaller pool then. And wouldn't it be great to really diversify your talent pools so that you're fishing from a much larger pool, because then you really are going to get the top talent. Also looking at people's progress and development once they work for your organization. So talent attraction is obviously great. You want to bring great people into your organizations, but if they're not supported and valued once they're enrolled, then they're just going to turn around and walk out the door again. We know there's a massive war for talent on at the moment. So looking at the ways that you sort of level the playing field when it comes to progress and development within your organizations is really important. Is everybody on a career path of some description? Are the career paths in your organization published so that people know what to expect as they're creating a career with your organization? Things like that you can look at. And obviously having really great policies and processes in place is super important to diversity and inclusion. Your policies are the things that are really going to support your people, through the more difficult times. We've all got, you can love your job, but you've still got a life outside of it. And things happen in life that are not pleasant, and actually having policies in place that can support people through that and know that they can be coming back to the job that they love, then that's going to be really important for people. They're going to feel more able to talk about some of the challenges that they're having with you, and as an employer, you're going to be able to make them feel like they're valued enough that you want to work with them through that. So policies are really important, and I've talked about the process piece already in talent attraction. Like, make sure you're using the same process for everybody. Make sure that your recruitment teams and your panels are all really well trained and can understand their own biases and how that might be influencing their decision making, things like that. And just, depending on where you are on your journey, just make a start on just understanding some of the language in D&I. I think when I talk to people about it, it seems to be one of the main sort of stumbling blocks for people, is not knowing how to talk about some of these issues. And obviously, as individuals, we don't want to inadvertently upset others. So there's a lot of resources out there. Read, listen, however you absorb information best. Just start to get to grips with some of the language. And the cartoon up here is one of my favorites when it comes to language. I think historically we've talked about equality quite a lot, but actually for me, equity is much more important. Equality is giving everybody the same thing, and equity is understanding that individuals are different and need different things in order to thrive. And that is sort of well illustrated by the cartoon on the slide here. You could take it one step further. There could be another box here for inclusion, and if that box existed, you'd be removing this purple wall. So it's about designing things so that it includes everybody without having to give them special measures, for want of better language there. So what's coming down the line now? I'm going to talk about some emerging trends and some challenges and opportunities. I am not going to include race and gender and disability because they are absolutely crucial, and there's still really big gaps in a lot of organizations around things like that. But actually we're starting to see, and they should be well established. You should be working on all of those areas of your organizations if you're doing diversity and inclusion work, and making sure that you've got a workforce made up of people from lots and lots of different groups, because they will bring lots of different life experiences, lots of different ways of thinking to your organization. But I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that we've really starting to see come through the pipeline in our conversations about diversity and inclusion at the moment. Hybrid working's here to stay. I think it's relatively safe to say that. I know that there are a lot of vocal opponents of it, in particular in the media, but a lot of employees now are kind of expecting, in professional services firms, kind of starting to expect that that will be the way that they work going forward. And I'm a huge advocate for hybrid working. I was actually a hybrid worker myself even before the pandemic. I've been doing it for years. It's really made a huge difference to my work-life balance. But as an employer, you've really got to ensure that you're putting effort into ensuring that opportunities are available to everybody in that kind of environment. If you've not got any kind of rules in your organization around hybrid working, and you're letting people make the decision about when they're coming in and when they're working from home, you might have people who want to come in every day, and you will probably have some people who want to work from home pretty much every day. That's great if you're giving people that flexibility, but are you making sure that the people who aren't necessarily visible in an office are still getting the same opportunities to work on the big projects and get that kind of exposure and get that kind of career development going? I'm sorry, the sun's just come out in Birmingham and it is really bright. Thanks, Jess is going to go close the blinds for me. We're also starting to see a lot of conversation happening about multi-generational workforces and some of the challenges that is, thank you, Jess, some of the challenges that organizations are starting to face when it comes to this. Most workplaces will have 4 generations of people working in them. Some will even have 5. All of those different generations have very different views on what the workplace should or shouldn't be and how it should work. All of them have differing communication styles. And as employers, it's really important to start to understand those so that you could make sure that you're engaging with employees in the way that they want to be engaged, and that you're also actively bringing different generations together to work effectively together. I've talked about equity and not equality. The solutions are generally not one size fits all. I mean, if you're designing things inclusively, you'd like to think that you've got a solution in place that suits most people, but with equity in mind, you're still going to have to work with individuals to understand what their needs are in order to help them to thrive in the workplace. And that's what being person-centered means. It means that every single one of your employees is going to be able to thrive. You might have heard the word intersectionality start to pop up more and more. Intersectionality, when you Google it, it will have some very technical descriptions of it, but in its essence, it basically means we're not all just one thing. I'm not just white, I'm not just a woman, I'm not just an employee, I'm not just a working parent, I'm all of those things. And all of those things make up the way that I view the world, you know, the lens I put over things, my what I'm passionate about, the way that I experience the workplace, what my life experiences are, how I'm discriminated against, or the advantages that I have. All of these different things and all of these different elements of who I am, that's intersectionality. And it specifically talks about, when you're thinking about the intersectionality, it's specifically around what kind of disadvantages people face. So if you're talking about a woman who is Black and disabled, she is likely to be facing far more discrimination in her day-to-day life than a Black man, for example, who doesn't have a disability. So it's understanding how the layers of individual people result in disadvantage or advantage in society. And I think this is the final bullet on this. This is one of my favorite bits that I'm starting to see is around increased leadership accountability for diversity and inclusion. We know that a lot of organizations have been doing D&I for a really long time. And I think initially, until we've kind of built this great understanding of the business benefits of it, leaders were kind of quite happy to let us get on with it. You know, they kind of signed off our activities, but they weren't terribly actively involved themselves. And I think we're starting to see that really change now. And I think it's really important that it is, because leaders have such a critical role to bringing diversity and inclusion to life. I'm going to skip over this slide. We are going to share the slides with you after today's session, and you can have a look at the way that we approach diversity and inclusion here at Mills Reeve. This is an overview of our strategy. Before I go to Q&A, I'm just going to ask everybody to have a look at this, this slide here and try and have a think about where you are on this particular place. Now, especially if you're down at the end where we've got people who are opposed to D&I or unaware of D&I, absolutely fine to be in those places if it's not something that you've engaged with before. And I don't think you need to go immediately from here right up to our happy little face with our committed guy. But, you know, really try and move yourself like one step up in the next 6 to 12 months by reading, engaging, listening to podcasts, however you like to learn, because this is really going to make your organizations more effective. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us.